You and I are going to explore the dynamic world of vexillology.
The fleet set sail for Rockall. Rockall, Rockall, to free the Isle of Rockall from fear of foreign foe. We sped across the planet to find this lump of granite, one rather startled gannet. In fact, we found Rockall. Hi, this is Dan, and you're listening to Flag Day. Together, we're going to explore the dynamic world of vexillology. Thank you for joining us. I've always been fascinated by islands. As a child, I would scour my grandfather's tattered Reader's Digest Atlas of the World and seek out new and unfamiliar rocks and islets. The more remote and far-flung, the better. 10-year-old me was particularly fascinated by Rockall, an islet 300 miles northwest of Britain which, thanks to some sloppy cartography, appeared to be a substantial chunk of real estate the size of the Isle of Wight, perhaps, or the Isle of Man. I imagined Rockall to be a little like St Kilda, isolated and windswept, but home to a hardy, industrious people who had succeeded in building a functioning society on a storm-battered rock. I recall my disappointment on discovering that Rockall was not only uninhabited, but uninhabitable. A slab of granite 56 feet tall, 110 feet in diameter, desolate, despairing, and awful, in the words of Lord Kennet. As Basil Hall, officer of the HMS Endymion, who in 1811 became the first man known to have landed on the island, stated, "The smallest point of a pencil could scarcely give it a place on any map which should not exaggerate its proportion." There is no record of Hall or his party having raised the Union Jack while on the rock. And while Hall may or may not have been the first to set foot on Rockall, he was not the first to sight the islet. St Brendan, the navigator, the 6th century sailor and adventurer, may have sighted Rockall as he scoured the northern seas for the Isle of the Blessed. And the Portuguese chart of 1550 features a Rockall or Rochal, R-O-C-H-O-L. The first definite literary reference to Rockall comes from the pen of Scottish writer Martin Martin, who, in 1698, described the people of St Kilda caring for French and Spanish sailors who had lost their ship at Rockall in the year 1686 and came into St Kilda. Upon their landing they pointed to the west, naming the Rockall to the inhabitants, and after that they pointed downward with their finger, signifying the sinking and perishing of their vessel. They showed them Rockall in the sea map, far west off St Kilda. From Martin's account, then, we can deduce that Rockall was both known and named at this time. Desolate and awful though it may be, that hasn't discouraged governments from asserting sovereignty over Rockall and the fishing grounds and oil fields it overlooks. And by the middle of the 20th century, Rockall found itself caught up in a four-way tug-of-love between Britain, Ireland, Denmark and Iceland. In 1955, for fear the Soviet Union might establish a monitoring station on the island, the British Army was testing missiles on the relatively nearby Isle of Uist, the government declared Rockall, all 8,000 square feet of it, UK territory. On the 15th of September, in order to cement British claims to the island, 3 Royal Marines and a civilian naturalist landed on Rockall via the helicopter of the HMS Vidal. Safely ashore, the 4 men climbed to Hall's Ledge, the only expanse of flat land on the island, and there dug a hole, mixing cement and erecting a flagpole fashioned from old propeller shafts. Then, before an audience of presumably very confused gannets, the party saluted and raised the Union Jack. As ceremonies concluded, Lieutenant Commander Desmond Scott declared, "In the name of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, I hereby take possession of this island of Rockall." A brass plaque, installed by the Royal Marines on Hall's Ledge, reads, "By authority of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of our other realms and territories, Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, etc., 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 and in accordance with Her Majesty's instructions dated 14/9/55, a landing was effected on this day upon the island of Rockall from HMS Vidal. The Union flag was hoisted and possession of the island was taken in the name of Her Majesty. Signed, R.H. Connell, Captain, HMS Vidal, 18 September 1955.
And we built up empires. That's how you build an empire. With the cunning use of flags.
Her Majesty's Royal Navy had landed men on some distant landmass and, with the cunning use of flags, made it somehow British. An old familiar story, but the last time it was to be told. For this bleak shard of granite was the very last territory to be incorporated into the British Empire. This surreal episode of imperial conquest, coinciding as it did with the decolonisation of formerly British territories in Africa and Asia, captured the British popular imagination and earned Rockall a mention in, for example, the Goons show, a popular radio comedy. That was the week that was, a weekly satirical review, and the Flanders and Swan song I quoted at the top of the episode. But it was all in deadly earnest. By order of Her Majesty's government, the Union flag was raised, a plaque was affixed, and Rockall really did become British, at least in the eyes of the British government. And though Ireland has contested British sovereignty over Rockall since the 1980s, the Danes and Iceland have never registered an objection. Since 1972 and the passing of the Island of Rockall Act, the Rock has legally been part of the Scottish county of Inverness-shire. In 1974, the United Kingdom reaffirmed its claim to Rockall by landing a further 4 Marines on the island, complete with a sentry box. From the box, as can be seen in this somewhat bonkers image, flew the ensign of the Royal Navy, the flag of St George bearing the Union Jack in the canton. British claims suffered a setback in 1982, however, when the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea ruled that islets incapable of supporting life could not be awarded economic zones. In response, former SAS man Tom McLean resided on the Rock for 40 days in 1985, occupying a wooden shelter bolted to Hall's Ledge and setting a record for solo residence that stood until the adventurer Nick Hancock survived 50 days alone on the island in 2014. As of the time of recording, 145 people are known to have set foot on the island, at least according to the Rockall Club, which was established by and for those who have visited. But how many flags have flown on Rockall? The answer is 6, including a flag unique to the island, because Rockall has its own flag. Kind of. In 1997, in protest at British government plans to survey for oil in the North Atlantic, 4 Greenpeace activists occupied the island for a then record 42 days, declaring themselves citizens of the state of Waveland and further declaring Rockall to be the new state's capital. The activists took shelter in a yellow solar-powered survival pod and, with one imagines somewhat less ceremony than was required of the Royal Marines, hoisted the flag of their new state, a design comprising a white field bearing a rainbow arch. Beneath the rainbow, emerging from 3 black waves, is Rockall in silhouette, its cliffs defaced by a cheerful-looking whale. And, as the incongruously jolly flag of Waveland fluttered in the grey skies above them, the activists declared, "The seas around Rockall, potentially rich in oil, are fought over by 4 nations, Britain, Denmark, Iceland and Ireland. By seizing Rockall, Greenpeace claims these seas for the planet and all its peoples. No one has the right to unleash this oil onto our threatened climate." As Peter Morris, one of Waveland's occupiers, later stated, "Greenpeace challenged the deep-sea oil developments round Rockall by living on the rock that summer to establish a stronger territorial claim than the UK government's, to stop the oil exploration and raise awareness of the terrible carbon logic." For 42 days, the Wavelandic flag flew alongside a banner reading "United Nations, no new oil," and the flags of the United Kingdom, Denmark, Iceland, Ireland and the Faroe Islands, flown by Greenpeace to symbolise Waveland's international character. Now, please indulge me in a moment of flag geekery. This is a flag channel, after all. Display of flags in this fashion is contrary to accepted flag protocol. No more than 2 flags should ever fly from the same flagpole, and they should never be flags of the same rank, i.e. no 2 national flags should ever be flown in this way, unless the flyer is seeking to relate that the nation represented by the upper flag has defeated militarily whoever is represented by the lower flag. Ideally, Greenpeace should have erected 6 individual flagpoles and flown the flags in alphabetical order from left to right. At nightfall, the flag should have been lowered with due ceremony. Flag Day condemns Greenpeace for their sloppiness in this matter. The Wavelandic flag seems to have been modelled on flags used by Greenpeace since its foundation. Formerly, Greenpeace used an unofficial flag comprising a green field and a four-coloured rainbow, typically blue, green, yellow and red, overarching either a dove or a map of the world. This is the forerunner of the current official flag of Greenpeace, designed by Daniel Brandt of Denmark, and in use since 2007. Brandt's flag features a rainbow of 7 colours, including oddly white, symbolising perhaps peace, overarching the world. At the foot of the flag is the familiar Greenpeace logo and the organisation's URL. Greenpeace has also used another flag, which, confusingly for a green organisation with green in its name, comprised the light blue field, a dove, and the Greenpeace logo. Those sympathetic to Greenpeace's aims were invited to become citizens of Waveland. Citizenship was available for free to all willing to recite the following pledge. Without violence and by bearing witness, to defend nature, to protect the global commons, to reform industrialism and to secure peace, believing in action rather than words. Duly naturalised, citizens were invited to participate in campaigns related to oil exploration. Greenpeace's occupation of Rockall took place early in internet history, and the campaign's novelty attracted media attention. However, Know-Hows, the company that had sponsored Waveland's online presence, collapsed in 1999, taking the state's archives and forums with it. And today Waveland is a barely remembered episode in the early history of online campaigning. Researching this episode, I found myself wondering, today when every rock and islet has been charted, and the internet lets us roam the hills and beaches of distant lands in an instant, can anywhere still feel as remote as Rockall did when I was leafing through maps as a child? Perhaps the nearest echo is in discovering a place so remote that no flag has ever been planted there. Rockall's flaglessness tells its own story. Not every place is meant to fly a flag. Some landscapes resist symbols altogether. Rockall, isolated, hostile, indifferent to human presence, is one of them. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for listening to Flag Day. We really appreciate your company. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. I always enjoy reading your comments and have a policy, yes, an official policy, of answering all queries, within reason. See you next time. Goodbye.
You and I are going to explore the dynamic world of vexillology.